The sound of cutlery against porcelain never felt so loud. Every small clang echoed through the room like an accusation. My birthday dinner should have been filled with laughter, warmth, and the comfort of family. Instead, the air carried something sharp, something invisible but heavy enough to make my chest tighten. I had waited all day for this evening, hoping it would remind me that no matter how complicated life became, family was still my anchor. My daughter sat across the table, her eyes distant, her smile strained. I told myself it was exhaustion, or perhaps a disagreement with her husband before coming here. But something inside me whispered that it was more than that. Parents have a way of sensing storms before they arrive. I kept glancing at her, searching for the child I once held in my arms, the one who used to draw birthday cards instead of signing legal documents. She looked beautiful, confident, successful, everything I had hoped for her. Yet, behind that success, there was a new coldness, like glass between us. I could see her but could not touch her world anymore. Her husband, David, sat beside her, calm, charming, too polite. The kind of politeness that hides calculation. Every time he spoke, he looked at me as if measuring each word. The table was perfect. Candles flickered, casting soft shadows on the walls. The scent of roasted lamb filled the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of my favorite dessert, chocolate mousse. My closest friends were there, my sister too. Yet I felt completely alone. I kept pretending that everything was fine because pretending had become easier than confronting what I feared. When the time came to cut the cake, everyone sang. I smiled, blew out the candles, and wished for peace, simple peace. My daughter leaned forward, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Happy birthday." Her voice trembled slightly, but no one noticed. Then she lifted her glass and said she had something to announce. The moment froze in my mind like a photograph. Her eyes glistened not with joy, but with something close to regret. My heart began to pound. She stood, her tone rehearsed, calm, and almost too composed. "I want to thank everyone for being here," she began. "Especially you, for everything you have done for me." She looked at me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "You have always taught me to be independent, to make my own decisions. So tonight, I am doing just that." The room fell silent. I tried to smile, uncertain of what was coming. "I have decided," she continued, "to take over the management of all your real estate holdings. From next month onward, I will be handling everything through my firm." The fork slipped from my hand. The sound it made when it hit the plate was louder than the applause that followed her words. Applause, yes, because everyone thought it was a gesture of care, a daughter stepping up for an aging parent. But I knew better. I had not agreed to any transfer. I had not signed anything. I looked at her, my pulse rising, but she avoided my eyes. David placed a hand on her shoulder, smiling as if everything was perfectly planned. He lifted his glass again, proposing a toast. "To family unity," he said. The irony burned more than the wine I swallowed to keep from speaking. After the toast, I tried to speak privately with her, but she kept slipping away, surrounded by guests. Each time I reached out, someone interrupted with congratulations or laughter. The night dragged on like a performance, and I was the only one who knew it was a tragedy. When the guests finally left, I stood in the kitchen alone. The tablecloth was stained with wine, half-melted candles dripping wax like tears. I found her note on the counter. Just a few words, but enough to hollow me out. "I know this hurts, but it is better this way. You have done enough. Let me take care of things now. Trust me." Trust. The word stabbed like glass. My entire life, I had built everything for her, every late night, every sacrifice, every plan for her future. And now, on my own birthday, she had quietly taken it all. I sat down, the quiet pressing against my ears. I remembered her 5th birthday, when she insisted on baking her own cake. She had covered it in messy icing, her small hands sticky with sugar, laughing uncontrollably. That memory hit me harder than the betrayal itself. Somewhere between then and now, something had broken, and I had not even noticed. When I finally went to bed, I could not sleep. My phone vibrated once, a message from an unknown number. It contained a single attachment, a scanned copy of a legal document. My name, my signature, my property details, everything. But the signature was not mine. The message underneath read, "You should not have trusted her husband." My hands went cold. The betrayal was not only real, it was premeditated. I stared at the glowing screen in the dark, the faint reflection of my own face looking back, older, defeated, but suddenly awake. That was the night I realized something far more sinister was at play. It was not just about property, it was about erasing me. I woke before dawn, my mind racing like a machine that refused to shut down. The house felt different that morning. It was the same place I had lived in for years, yet somehow foreign, like someone had moved the walls while I slept. I made coffee just to feel the warmth in my hands, something to remind me I was still here, still real. But no amount of heat could drive away the chill that settled in my chest. I opened the message again, reading it over and over, trying to make sense of it. My signature was perfect, identical to the one on every document I had ever signed. But I knew my own handwriting, the pressure of the pen, the rhythm of my strokes. That signature was too even, too clean. Whoever did it had practiced. It was not carelessness, it was precision. I thought of calling my daughter, but what would I say? That someone forged my name and used it to transfer everything I owned. She would deny it, or worse, pretend she did not understand. My voice would shake, and she would sound calm, and the balance would tilt further against me. Instead, I went to my study. The drawer where I kept old contracts and property deeds was slightly open. I could have sworn I had closed it the night before. Inside, the folders were rearranged, some facing upside down, some missing altogether. I flipped through them, my heart sinking with every empty plastic sleeve. One file caught my attention. It was labeled, Main Holdings, Confidential. Inside were 3 documents, a notarized statement, a power of attorney, and a transfer authorization letter. Each bore my name. Each carried that same perfect signature. I sat still for a long time, staring at them, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. The dates were recent, just 2 weeks ago. I tried to remember where I was that day, but everything blurred together. I had attended a doctor's appointment, met an old friend for lunch, and gone home early. There had been nothing unusual. Yet, according to these papers, I had met with a legal representative and signed away control of every major property in my name. At the bottom of the stack, a small sticky note read, filed by request of legal guardian, M. Turner. That was David's lawyer. My pulse spiked. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my call history. There it was, a short, 2-minute call from an unknown number on the same day those documents were dated. I had answered it without thinking at the time. A woman had asked a few harmless questions, something about a survey related to real estate tax updates. I had given polite answers and hung up. My throat went dry. They had used that call to record my voice. My consent, twisted into validation. My voice had probably been used as a digital confirmation for something I never agreed to. That realization shattered something in me. Not anger, at least, not yet. It was humiliation. I had spent a lifetime believing that my family would protect me, not strip me bare while smiling across the dinner table. I drove to the city without breakfast, the papers stuffed into an envelope on the passenger seat. The streets were still quiet, the sky gray and heavy. Every red light felt like a test of patience I no longer had. My lawyer, an old friend named Samuel, opened his office early. The moment he saw my face, he knew this was not a routine visit. I handed him the documents without a word. He scanned them quickly, his brow tightening with each page. Then he looked up. "These are legally binding," he said quietly. "And they were filed 3 days ago." "Filed?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Filed where?" "County registrar." "Which means they have already been processed." I felt the air leave my lungs. He continued, his tone low but steady. "If these are forged, it is serious. But you will need to prove that you did not sign them. It will not be easy. The notary involved has verified your identity, your voice, your signature. That means someone either used a falsified ID or had access to your personal information." My hands trembled. "Can it be undone?" "It can be challenged," he said. "But it will require court proceedings. Evidence, witnesses, handwriting experts. And your daughter," he hesitated, "will have to be named as the beneficiary of fraudulent transfer." The word fraudulent cut through me like ice. He leaned back, studying me. "Are you sure she is involved?" I wanted to say yes, but the words would not come. I still clung to the hope that she was being misled, that her husband was the one pulling the strings. But deep down, a quieter voice whispered, she knew. Samuel told me to keep quiet until he verified the notary's credentials. He warned that confronting them directly might alert whoever orchestrated this. I nodded, though every part of me screamed to march to her office and demand an explanation. When I left his building, the morning had turned brighter, but it felt wrong, like sunlight in a graveyard. I sat in my car, staring at the envelope. My hands itched to tear it apart, to burn the papers and pretend none of this existed. But I could not. Those pages were proof that my trust had been used as a weapon. That afternoon, I returned home to find a delivery envelope wedged in my front gate. No sender name, just my address and the same careful handwriting I had seen on the sticky note. Inside was a printed letter. "You will regret going to a lawyer. Some things are better left buried. Think of your daughter before you act." No signature, no contact information, just that quiet threat. I stood there, the letter shaking in my hands. The warning was clear, stay silent or lose her completely. But as I looked around my empty house, something inside me hardened. They had already taken everything material from me. What else was left to lose? The only sound in the room was the soft hum of the refrigerator, steady and cold, like the silence of betrayal itself. I knew then that this would not end quietly. I did not speak to anyone the next morning. I wanted silence, but my mind gave me noise. The letter lay on the counter like a stain I could not scrub away. I read it again until the words felt carved into me. Think of your daughter before you act. I had raised that child with a steady hand and an open door. I had given her a world to grow in. Now a stranger told me to be quiet for her sake, as if love meant surrender. I called Samuel and told him about the letter. He told me to keep it sealed in a plastic sleeve, to print the message on my phone that had the forged documents attached, to back up everything twice. Practical steps steadied my pulse. I opened an old lockbox and placed the items inside, then hid the box in the most ordinary place I could think of, behind a row of cookbooks that no one touched. By noon I decided to see my daughter in her office. I did not warn her. I wanted to read the truth on her face before rehearsed lines could take root. The receptionist greeted me with a practiced smile and asked me to wait. A glass wall separated the lobby from the main floor, rows of desks, screens, clean lines, a world that looked efficient and distant. I watched my daughter walk out of a conference room with David at her side. She looked startled when she saw me, then recovered. David's smile appeared as if pulled by a wire. She walked over and hugged me. I felt her heartbeat. It did not match the warmth in her voice. She asked about my health, my sleep, my appetite. Small talk like gauze over a wound. I asked if we could speak alone. She led me to a side room with a round table and a single plant that looked too perfect to be real. David followed and took a seat without asking. I placed my phone on the table and opened the scan of the forged transfer letter. I slid it toward her. She went still. Her eyes flicked to David before she answered. She said the documents were part of a planned transition, something we had often discussed, a natural shift, nothing more. I said we had never agreed to any transfer. I asked who arranged the notary. David answered for her. He said a reputable professional had verified everything. He said I had given voice consent on a recorded call. I felt heat climb into my face, but I kept my tone even. I asked for the name of the notary and the date of the meeting. David said the firm would share those details through counsel. He smiled like ice. My daughter placed a hand on my arm and said I was under strain, that the birthday dinner had been too much, that I should let her handle the load. She said she had always admired my strength, then called me brave, then called me tired. The words landed like a net. Strength, brave, tired, praise that weakened. I said I would not sign away my life while I still had breath in my body. I stood to leave. David stood as well and spoke softly, with that careful calm that makes people doubt their own balance. He said if I went to court, the press could make a mess of a private family matter. He said petitions for guardianship open doors no one wants to see. He said stress harms those who carry it at my age. He said the best gift I could give my daughter was rest. I looked at my daughter. Her jaw was tight. She would not meet my eyes. I told her I had loved her since the day I knew her heartbeat. I told her my love did not make me blind. I told her I would fight. The room felt smaller by the second. I left without shaking David's hand. In the lobby, my legs trembled so hard I had to lean on the wall for a moment. I breathed until the shaking passed. Parents learn to do that. We steady ourselves where no one sees. Back in my car, I noticed a black sedan in the mirror that had also been on my street the day before. It pulled out 2 cars after me, then turned when I turned, then drifted away when traffic thickened. I told myself I was being jumpy. I did not stop watching the mirror. At home, I used an old recorder I had kept from a class I once taught and spoke a clean log of events. Dates, names, threats, the forged signature, the letter at the gate, the exchange at the office. I stored that file in 3 places. I sent one to Samuel and asked him to confirm the notary's license and to pull the county filings. He replied with a short note that said he was on it and to avoid direct contact with anyone tied to David for now. In the evening, my sister called. She had heard from a friend that I looked unwell at the dinner. Gossip moves like smoke. You smell it before you see fire. I told her I was sorting out some paperwork and that I would explain soon. She offered to come over. I told her no. I did not want more eyes in my house, not until I knew how deep this went. I could not eat. I walked through rooms I had painted with my own hands years ago. I reached out and touched a doorframe where tiny pencil lines marked my daughter's height each year. The lines stopped at age 13. After that, growth had moved inward, away from walls I could touch. I stood there a long time. Memory can be a kind friend and a harsh judge at the same time. Near midnight, I took out the transfer papers again. I placed my signature from an old passport next to the one on the forged letter. The slant matched. The pressure matched. Even the small tail I added sometimes on the last letter matched. Only one tiny detail betrayed the lie. My real hand made a shallow pause before the last stroke. The forged line had no pause. A machine can learn shape. It cannot learn hesitation. That thought gave me strength. Hesitation is human. That pause was mine. I fell asleep in a chair and woke to a sharp knock at the door before sunrise. 2 plain envelopes lay on the mat. No return address. The first bore a county stamp. The second held a single sheet typed in a plain font. I opened the stamped one first with a careful hand, as if the paper could bite. Inside was a notice of hearing. Petition for temporary guardianship. Allegations of cognitive decline. Risk to estate assets. Attached was a brief statement by a medical evaluator who had never examined me. The signature at the bottom belonged to a clinic I had never visited. The date on the notice was 2 days away. I opened the second envelope with a dread that felt heavy and cold. The sheet inside held 3 lines. You have 48 hours. Withdraw your challenge. Think of your daughter. I did not sit down. I stood in the doorway and felt a wave of heat pass through me, not from fear, but from a new kind of resolve that starts in the bones. They planned to move fast, to label me unfit, to freeze my accounts, to take the keys to my life while calling it care. If they won that hearing, the next step would be permanent control. My name would mean nothing on any page. I called Samuel at once. He answered on the second ring. I read the notice word for word. He swore under his breath and told me to bring it to him at once. He said we would file an emergency response, demand a real evaluation, and request sanctions for false statements. He told me to check my accounts and my safe deposit box in case someone had moved ahead of us. I logged in while he stayed on the line. 2 accounts showed standard balances. The third, which held rental income, had a new cosign authority flag. My heart slammed against my ribs. I had never granted that flag. The safe deposit record showed a visit logged 3 days ago. I had not gone near that vault in months. I told Samuel. He went silent for a long breath. Then his voice turned hard. He said he would meet me at the bank right now. He told me to bring the envelopes, the transfer papers, the letter, the phone with the scan, and the recorder with the log. I locked the house, stepped onto the porch, and paused. Across the street, the same black sedan idled by the curb. The engine hummed. The driver watched the road, not me, but the message felt plain. I lifted my phone and took a photo. The car pulled away. I drove to the bank with a calm I did not feel. When I reached the underground lot, I parked, checked the mirrors, checked the walkway, and made for the elevator. My reflection in the metal doors looked older than it had a week ago, but the eyes looking back did not look broken. The doors slid open. A man in a gray suit stepped out and brushed my shoulder as he passed. He did not say a word. He left a small folded note in my hand. I opened it inside the empty elevator. 4 words, written in neat ink, stop. She signed everything. Samuel met me at the bank steps. His tie was crooked, his coat unbuttoned, signs that he had rushed. We went straight to the clerk. She confirmed the record. A man had accessed my safe deposit box using an authorization form filed 2 days earlier. She produced a photocopy of the ID used. The photo was mine. The signature beneath it looked perfect. Samuel took one look and said, "We have a problem deeper than forgery. Someone has a mirror of your identity." We spent an hour filing a fraud report, freezing access, and arranging security footage retrieval. The clerk promised copies by evening. When she left the desk, Samuel lowered his voice. "They have moved fast because they know timing beats truth. We must move faster." He drove me to his office. The blinds were half closed, the air thick with paper and tension. He spread the documents across the table like playing cards in a losing hand. "Your daughter's husband works with Turner and Mace," he said. "Their firm processed the transfers. I called an associate there. He refused to talk but hinted that someone high up ordered the filings pushed through. I asked what that meant. Samuel said it meant leverage, not law. He handed me a recorder. "Start documenting every contact, every visit, every call. We build a trail." While he arranged photocopies, I walked down the corridor for water. That was when I heard them. 2 voices behind a half-open door. One belonged to a clerk from the registrar's office. The other was unfamiliar, male, smooth, deliberate. "The hearing is already scheduled," the clerk said. The other answered, "Then make sure the evaluation stays sealed until after. If the parent speaks, discredit it as confusion." The words froze me. Confusion. A word meant to erase truth. I stepped closer, holding my breath. The clerk asked, "And the lawyer?" "Handle him later," the man replied. The daughter will testify she fears exploitation. Public sympathy covers everything. My hand trembled, but I kept still until footsteps approached. I ducked into the stairwell, heart hammering. When I returned to Samuel's office, I told him what I heard. He pressed his lips together and said, "We record the pattern. This confirms coordination." He called a contact at the courthouse and requested an early transcript of the guardianship filing. While he spoke, I stared at the framed diploma on his wall, evidence of years spent defending strangers. Now he was my only defense. That night I returned home exhausted but wired. I checked every window latch. The phone rang once, twice, then stopped. No message. I unplugged it. Sleep came in fragments, full of faces that blurred between love and deceit. Morning brought a faint sound outside, footsteps on gravel. I looked through the blinds and saw an envelope taped to my gate. The handwriting matched the last threat. I stepped outside and peeled it off carefully. Inside was a single photo printed on office paper, me and Samuel entering the bank yesterday, the time stamped clear. Beneath it, in block letters, "Stop feeding the lawyer." I felt anger rise like a tide, washing away fear. They wanted silence. They would get defiance instead. At noon, Samuel called. "We have the transcript," he said. "It lists the evaluator as Dr. Leah Gray." I frowned. I do not know her. She runs a clinic that specializes in elder cognitive assessments. Small office, low traffic. "I will meet you there." We drove separately. Her clinic sat between a pharmacy and a dentist, plain brick walls, a fading sign. Inside, a young receptionist said Dr. Gray was with a client. Samuel flashed his card. 5 minutes later, the doctor appeared. Her eyes flickered when she saw my name on the paperwork Samuel handed over. She asked us to step into her office. It smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Diplomas lined one wall, family photos the other. She sat down, folding her hands. "I never examined you," she said at once. "That signature on my report is not mine." Samuel's eyebrows shot up. "Someone filed a false medical opinion under your name." She nodded slowly. "I remember a man visiting last week with pre-filled forms. He said the patient had already completed evaluation elsewhere and only needed a verification stamp for court records. He presented an official letter from Turner and Mace. David's firm again." Samuel asked for a description. She provided it. Tall, early 40s, clean-shaven, British accent. I had seen that man once before, standing behind David at a charity dinner, a silent shadow. Dr. Gray agreed to sign an affidavit denying authorship of the report. She looked shaken. "If they forged my name, they can ruin my license." I thanked her. My voice broke halfway through. She touched my arm lightly and said, "People like that count on fear. Do not let them win." Outside, the wind picked up, scattering a few dry leaves across the pavement. Samuel turned to me. "We have enough to demand a stay of the hearing. We file first thing tomorrow. Tonight, you keep lights on and doors locked." I nodded. He drove off. I watched his taillights vanish, then headed home. The black sedan was there again, parked farther down the street. I parked my car and walked straight toward it. The window rolled down an inch. A voice inside said softly, "You are making a mistake." Then the car pulled away. Inside the house, I recorded every detail. Time, words, the smell of the air, the distance from the gate. Precision felt like control. When I finished, I poured a glass of water and looked around the empty room. The photographs on the wall caught the light: birthdays, graduations, holidays, smiles that once felt permanent. My phone buzzed with a new message. No number again. The text read, "If you go to court, she loses everything." I typed back before fear could stop me. "Then she should not have taken mine." No reply came. Only the blinking cursor, a heartbeat in silence. I turned off the phone and stared into the dark window where my reflection hovered, older, thinner, but alive with something new. Not rage, not despair. Purpose. I whispered to the empty house, "You taught her how to fight. Now she will learn who she learned it from." The courthouse steps felt steeper than they were. I carried a folder that held my life in thin sheets: the forged transfers, the notice, the threats, Dr. Gray's affidavit, the log of events. Samuel walked beside me with a steady pace that said he had done this 1,000 times. My breath fell into rhythm with his stride. I told myself that rhythm meant I was not alone. The hallway outside the courtroom hummed with low voices and the rustle of papers. On the bench across from us sat my daughter. She wore a dark suit, hair pulled back, eyes set on a fixed point on the wall as if focus alone could erase me. David sat beside her, calm as stone. Their counsel, a man with polished shoes and an unblinking gaze, reviewed notes as if the outcome was already written. When the clerk called the case, We filed in. The room carried that stillness that makes every small sound louder. The judge watched us over reading glasses. Samuel introduced our emergency motion to stay the guardianship petition and to strike the fraudulent medical statement. He spoke in clean lines: forged identity, false report, threats, irregular filings, rush to hearing. He did not waste a word. He placed Dr. Gray's sworn denial on the table like a weight. Opposing counsel rose with a tone that dripped courtesy. He said the daughter acted from care. He said the parents showed signs of forgetfulness, poor judgment, late payments, and a pattern of erratic choices that put assets at risk. He said the spouse had little to do with the paperwork and that the firm only followed instructions verified by voice consent and notarized signatures. He described me as proud and stubborn, frightened by the natural transition of authority that aging demands. The word aging hit me like a shove between the shoulder blades. Samuel handed me a pen to keep in my hand. He knows that a tool steadies a shaking palm. The judge requested foundation on the medical statement. Samuel called Dr. Gray. She walked to the stand with a spine of steel. She stated her name, her license, her practice, and then said the most important line of the morning: she had never examined me, never signed the report, never authorized her name for any filing related to me. She described the man who brought pre-filled forms and the letter from Turner and Mace. Opposing counsel objected to hearsay. The judge allowed the description for context on identity fraud and asked for the letter if it surfaced. Then came the notary. A woman entered with a tidy suit and a clipboard. She swore that she witnessed my signature on the transfer letter. She said I arrived with a folder and provided identification. She said I answered questions about my holdings with clarity. She spoke with the mild certainty of someone who fills in blanks for a living. Samuel leaned on the date. He asked her to recall details from that day: the address of the office, the layout, the color of the chair I sat in, the tone of my voice. She answered each, smooth and quick. Then he asked for security footage. She hesitated. She said the building stored footage for 30 days only. The date of the meeting sat at 31 days. The judge watched her face closely and asked if she had a copy of my identification. She produced a photocopy that matched the one from the bank. Same photo, same clean signature. My stomach turned. The judge noted for the record that identity theft was now an active issue woven into the filings. Opposing counsel called my daughter. She took the stand with a slow breath. She said she loved me. She said she had watched my stress rise, my sleep fade, my judgment wobble. She said vendors complained about delayed payments and tenants about repair neglect. She said she begged me to rest. She said I agreed in principle to let her firm manage the assets and that forms followed that plan. She said the guardianship petition was a last resort to protect me from exploitation that wolves in the world would gladly carry out. My heart broke and hardened at the same time. Samuel asked for dates. He asked for emails. He asked for any text where I agreed to transfer authority. She said those exchanges were in person, family to family, and that she had avoided writing because she feared public leaks. He led her to the recorded phone consent. She confirmed that I had answered simple verification questions about the holdings. She framed it as routine. She kept her eyes glossy. The room leaned toward her. Then Samuel played the recording from my old device, the log I had made, the threats, the letters, the black sedan, the hearing date set before notice, the bank visit with a cloned ID. He did not embellish. He let the plain record sit like stone on a table. He asked the judge to compare my steady narration with the sudden claim that I was unfit. Opposing counsel produced their audio of voice consent. The clip began with a standard introduction and a series of yes or no answers. It sounded like me. The judge leaned in. Samuel requested a spectral analysis by an expert due to suspected synthesis from prior calls. The judge agreed to a preliminary review and looked at the clock. Time moved like honey when a life hung in the air. The judge turned to me and asked if I wished to speak. I stood, palms open on the table. I spoke with slow care. I talked about the letter that told me to think of my daughter before I acted. I talked about the notice set 2 days from delivery. I talked about Dr. Gray's denial. I talked about my daughter's birthday toast that introduced a false choice between love and obedience. I did not raise my voice. I let stillness fill the gaps. The judge called a recess. In the corridor, opposing counsel approached with a polite smile that did not touch his eyes. He said there was a path that would spare everyone pain: withdraw the fraud claim, accept a limited management agreement, postpone the guardianship issue, allow oversight by a neutral accountant. He said it would save my daughter from public scrutiny. He said it would save me from an evaluation that strangers love to watch. Samuel spoke before I could answer. He said any agreement would first require an independent review of all filings, reversal of unauthorized cosign authority, and a full report on the safe deposit access. He said we would not trade silence for control. The smile faded. Back in the room, the judge returned with notes. He granted a temporary stay on the guardianship petition, citing disputed facts and a credible allegation of identity fraud. He ordered an independent medical evaluation by a court-appointed clinician. He required all parties to preserve evidence, including building footage, phone records, and bank entry logs. He barred any further transfer or access changes until a further hearing. Relief moved through me like air after a long dive. It did not last. Opposing counsel placed a new folder on the table. He said a courier had delivered it during recess. Inside lay a stack of photos and time stamps that showed a figure entering a notary office on the date in question. The figure wore my coat, carried my folder, and walked with my gait. The last frame showed a profile that looked like mine from a distance. The judge studied the page and frowned. Samuel asked for the raw file. The judge agreed. As the clerk began to mark the exhibits, a bailiff stepped forward with a small envelope addressed to me. The judge allowed me to open it at counsel table. Inside lay a single key tag from my bank's vault and a handwritten line. "You missed something in box 312. The judge asked what it was. Samuel requested permission for immediate retrieval under court supervision. The judge granted it and scheduled the session for that afternoon, with both sides present. Opposing counsel looked pleased, as if the box held a neat end to my resistance. David's mouth curved at the corner. My daughter stared at the envelope in my hand as if it might burn through the wood. The judge rose. The clerk announced the recess until the vault inspection. We filed out in controlled quiet. In the hallway, a woman I once trusted stepped from the crowd and lowered her voice near my ear. Old friend, steady presence at family events, keeper of recipes and secrets. She whispered 5 words that made the floor tilt beneath me. "You asked me to witness." The word witness rang in my ears long after she walked away. The corridor blurred. For a moment, sound disappeared. All I could hear was my heartbeat, heavy and deliberate, echoing like footsteps in a tunnel I could not see the end of. She was my oldest friend, the kind of person who knew the hidden rhythms of my house, the shade of my moods, the scent of the perfume I wore when I was nervous. If she had witnessed anything, it meant the betrayal had roots deeper than I had imagined. Samuel touched my shoulder, grounding me. He asked what she had said. I told him quietly. He nodded once and said we would address it after the vault inspection. But my thoughts had already slipped backward, to a time when trust had not yet become a fragile thing. I remembered the night my daughter was born. I had stood outside the hospital room window, watching her through the glass, wrapped in a blanket too big for her. She was quiet, unlike the other newborns who filled the ward with cries. The nurse had laughed and said, "That calm will make her wise." I believed it. For years, I mistook her silence for strength. When she was 10, I built her a wooden study table with my own hands. She had insisted on helping, holding nails and measuring boards. I can still hear her laughter when the first drawer jammed. She told me she would be a lawyer one day, that she would defend people who had no one to speak for them. I told her she could be anything she wanted. I meant it. Her mother died when she was 17. The funeral was small, private. I remember standing beside her at the gravesite, her fingers cold in mine. She did not cry. Instead, she whispered, "I will take care of you now." I thought it was love. Now I know it was a promise that turned into something else over the years, something sharper. After the burial, I spent months rebuilding our lives. I worked long hours, pushed aside grief, and tried to give her stability. She went to university, graduated with honors, joined a firm, and married David 2 years later. I gave her my blessing, though I saw the ambition behind his charm. He was a strategist, and she admired that in him. She said he reminded her of me. The irony did not reveal itself until now. One memory refused to fade, the day she brought David home for dinner the first time. He had looked around my house with quiet eyes, complimented the furniture, then asked detailed questions about property ownership, lease durations, and investments. It struck me as odd at the time, but I dismissed it as youthful curiosity. My daughter had laughed when I mentioned it later, saying, "He just thinks in numbers." Now, those numbers had names, mine. The courtroom noises pulled me back to the present. I stood at the window while Samuel spoke with the bailiff. My reflection in the glass merged with the faint memory of the younger me standing at another window decades ago, looking at a newborn with blind hope. Time folds that way sometimes, cruelly, without warning. I felt the old warmth of fatherhood, or motherhood, whatever name fits this soul, mixing with the sting of betrayal. Love had been the soil where deception grew. I could not tell when the change began, only that it had been slow, patient, disguised as care. Samuel returned. He said the judge had scheduled the vault inspection within the hour. Both legal teams would attend, accompanied by a court clerk. The contents would be recorded, sealed, and logged as evidence. We drove in silence. The courthouse and the bank stood only a few blocks apart, but the journey felt longer than years. I looked out at the city, the streets I once walked with her, the park where she learned to ride a bicycle, the cafe where we celebrated her first case win. Every place was still there, only my place in her world had vanished. At the bank, the security guard recognized me and nodded. The air inside was cold, sterile, indifferent. The vault manager met us with 2 clerks and the opposing counsel already waiting. My daughter and David stood near the back wall. She avoided my gaze again. He did not. The judge's representative unlocked the vault and led us down the corridor lined with numbered boxes. The sound of metal echoed with each step. When we reached box 312, my hands shook, not from fear but from the weight of what might be waiting. The clerk inserted the key, turned it, and opened the small metal door. Inside lay a sealed envelope with my name on it, a USB drive, and a small velvet box. The clerk handed them to the judge's representative, who placed them on the table in the viewing room. Opposing counsel gestured toward me. "You may open them." I reached for the envelope first. Inside was a letter, my handwriting, my signature at the bottom. I read the first line and felt the room tilt. "I hereby authorize my daughter, Sarah, to manage all financial and real estate affairs on my behalf, effective immediately." It was dated 6 months earlier. The ink looked fresh. Samuel read over my shoulder, his jaw tightening. "This is another forgery," he said. David's lawyer smiled. "You may want to check the handwriting before you make that claim." The judge's representative handed the letter to the forensic technician present. He examined it under the light, nodding slowly. Ink and paper age matched the date. Pressure points are consistent with the original hand. My stomach dropped. The room spun again, slower this time. Samuel whispered, "They must have replicated more than your signature. They mimicked your writing entirely." I opened the velvet box next. Inside was my late spouse's wedding ring. I had kept it in a jewelry case at home, untouched for years. Seeing it there, locked away, felt like desecration. David watched my reaction carefully, as if taking mental notes. The USB drive was last. The clerk connected it to a secure terminal. A single video file appeared. It played on the monitor, a recording of me, or someone who looked and sounded exactly like me, sitting at a desk, signing papers. I watched in disbelief. The face, the gestures, the voice, all mine. Samuel leaned forward. "That is deepfake footage," he said flatly, "generated from old video clips and voice samples." The judge's representative paused the video and noted the claim for technical analysis. David's lawyer protested, saying authenticity had already been verified by a digital expert. The clerk logged both statements. I looked at my daughter again. Her lips trembled, but she did not speak. Something inside me broke then, not loudly, not dramatically. It was a quiet fracture, the kind you only feel when everything you built begins to crumble under its own history. I thought of her as a child again, asleep on my chest, trusting that I could keep her safe. The hearing would continue, but in that moment, I realized the real fight had shifted. It was no longer about property or reputation. It was about truth, the kind that leaves no one untouched. As we left the vault, the corridor lights flickered once. Samuel whispered, "They are desperate now." Desperation leaves traces. Outside, the air smelled like rain. I stood under the gray sky, feeling drops gather in my hair, my clothes, my soul. Somewhere behind me, David spoke quietly to my daughter. She did not answer. When the car door closed, Samuel said, "We will bring in digital forensics. They can fake ink, voice, even your face. But not motive. That will be their undoing." I nodded slowly, watching the courthouse tower fade behind raindrops on glass. What they had forged was my likeness. What they could never forge was my memory of love. And love, once wounded, becomes something they should have feared. She stood near the pillar with her bag clutched to her chest, the way she did when she carried secrets. Old friend, family through choice. She did not hug me. She looked at the floor and said she had signed a witness line months ago at my request. The words slid into me like a thin blade. I asked when. She named a date that matched the letter in the vault. She said I had called her, said I needed a favor, said it was a routine update. She remembered the office, the pen, the stapler with a chipped corner. Details that made her story feel solid. I told her I had never made that call. She went pale and said my number had appeared on her phone. She showed me the old log. My number sat there like a fingerprint. Samuel asked her for any message or follow-up. She said a man from Turner and Mace had thanked her later and sent a courier with a box of chocolates. She thought it was courtesy. She looked at me as if asking for forgiveness before I had the strength to give it. Then she said the line that crushed the air in my chest, The man had told her she had saved me from myself. We moved away from the crowd. Samuel took her statement and promised to protect her from retaliation. She kept apologizing, each sorry smaller than the last. I had no room for anger left for her. The system had used her kindness as a lever. I asked if she had noticed anything odd in the office. She remembered a wall clock that ticked too loud and a printer that kept spitting out the same page. The printer jammed, the man swore softly, then changed the cartridge. That detail hit Samuel like a spark. New cartridge meant traceable serials. If we could get the printer log, we could track the job that produced my forged forms. We returned to court for the afternoon session. My daughter kept her gaze fixed on the judge's bench. David whispered in her ear once, then again. The clerk called the matter for evidentiary scheduling. Samuel requested subpoenas for Turner and Mace printer logs, courier logs, visitor logs, and internal emails for the 2 weeks around the supposed signing. Opposing counsel objected, said it was a fishing trip, said the request aimed to burden a respectable firm. Samuel replied that forgery hides inside machines and calendars, not poetry. The judge granted narrow subpoenas on technical logs, denied broad email discovery for now, and set a deadline of 7 days. Outside, rain tapped the windows. The court set the independent evaluation for the next morning with a clinician from a different district. That gave me one night to carry a sinking house on my back without falling through the floor. Back at home, I opened the recorder and spoke a clear account of the conversation with my friend. Then I checked the door camera archive. A courier had indeed come the week after her witness visit, same uniform as the vault courier. He left a small package at her address, not mine. I called her and asked her to search her storage for that box. She found it within minutes. She sent photos, thin gold script on the lid, inside foam, a thank you card, and 2 wrappers that she had kept because she recycles. Samuel told her not to throw anything away. Packaging holds codes that live longer than lies. As dusk folded in, I heard tires stop outside. The same black sedan idled at the curb. I refused to hide. I stepped onto the porch and started filming with my phone. The driver rolled down the window and said the same line as before, I was making a mistake. I asked his name. He did not answer. He pointed at the camera and said the court of public opinion loves a parent who refuses help and then falls. I asked who paid him to say that. He smiled and drove off. I kept filming until his taillights vanished. Inside, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. A short audio clip played. It captured my voice thanking my friend for witnessing the forms and promising dinner next week. The tone, the pauses, the small laugh at the end. If I had not lived inside my own skin, I would have believed it. I sent the clip to Samuel. He responded with one sentence, save the file, copy it twice, touch nothing else. The doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw the neighbor from across the street, a quiet man who tended roses. He held a small package and said it was placed on my step by mistake. I thanked him and brought it inside. The label had no return address. I opened it over a tray. Inside sat a single digital recorder and a sticky note that read, Play track 3. My hand shook as I pressed the button. A conversation filled the room. My daughter's voice asked David how long this would take. David said the path depended on my resistance and that guardianship would be a clean end if I continued to fight. He told her to trust the process and to stay away from written messages. She asked about me with a crack in her voice. He told her guilt serves no purpose when a plan is already moving. I sat very still. That crack in her voice mattered. It did not absolve her. It told me her heart had not died completely. That made the pain worse and the resolve sharper. I called Samuel on speaker and played track 3. He told me to stop after a minute. He said possession of a device like that could become a trap if chain of custody looked messy. He said he would collect it with a clerk in the morning and file a motion to admit pending analysis. He told me to store it in a sealed bag and to note the time. Then the second blow came. My account alert ping. A wire attempt had failed due to the court's freeze, but the request history now showed a new login from a device in my daughter's office network. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Samuel told me to screenshot every detail. He called the bank's counsel and looped them in on the freeze order and the criminal referral. I poured water and could not drink it. My hands would not obey. I placed the glass down and walked to the wall with the pencil marks of my child's height. I placed my hand flat against the old paint. I told the empty room that I would not lose twice. Not the assets and then the soul of the bond that built them. Near midnight, the old friend called again. Her voice trembled. She said someone had knocked at her door and left a new envelope. Inside sat a photocopy of her driver's license with a red stamp, complicit. She asked if she should leave town. I told her to stay with her sister and to let Samuel know her location. I told her I did not blame her. I meant it. She cried quietly and hung up. Sleep did not come. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a list. Every act, every contact, every small mercy I could still grant myself. The pen steadied me. I wrote the sentence that no one could fake. I know who I am. That line felt like a stake in the ground. The sun rose pale. I left early for the court evaluation, recorder sealed, package sealed, nerve strung tight as wire. A block from the clinic, a message arrived from a number labeled unknown. 4 words glowed on the screen, clean and final. Your friend recorded you. I stopped walking. I looked up. A figure stood across the street, hood low, phone in hand, camera aimed at me. The phone flashed once, then the figure slipped into a waiting car and disappeared into morning traffic, leaving the street quiet and a truth that made my chest ache. The second betrayal was not a blow in the open. It was a seed planted in a familiar hand, watered by fear, and harvested by a stranger who understood how love can be bent into a signature. I kept moving toward the clinic door, each step a vow spoken without sound. I would not yield. I would not let the story end with a stamp that said unfit. Inside the lobby, the receptionist asked my name and offered a clipboard. My pen hovered over the line. Through the glass, in the reflection of the hallway, I saw my daughter round the corner with David at her shoulder, eyes red, face set. She did not see me yet. I saw the smallest tremor in her fingers before she folded them tight. I signed the clipboard with a hand that no one else could copy and waited for the door to open. The clinic lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and rain-soaked coats. I could hear my heartbeat again, not loud, but steady, a drum reminding me that I was still present in this body they were trying to erase. My daughter sat across the room with David. She twisted a tissue in her hand until it tore. He whispered something that made her shoulders stiffen. The clinician arrived, clipboard under her arm, polite smile ready. She led me into a quiet room with white walls and no clock. She said the evaluation would last an hour. She asked about orientation, date, year, current president, details of daily routines. I answered clearly, evenly. Each question felt like a test of existence. Every correct response another line of defense. Halfway through, she asked if I knew why I was being evaluated. I told her I was accused of forgetting who I was. She did not flinch. She wrote something down, then looked at me. You seem aware. I said awareness had become my only weapon. When the evaluation ended, she escorted me back to the lobby. My daughter stood as I entered, her lips trembling. She started to speak, but David's hand landed on her wrist. She sat down again. I turned to leave, but she whispered my name. The sound cracked something inside me. I looked back once. Her eyes begged for forgiveness her words would not dare to ask for. Outside, the sky was gray, heavy with the promise of another storm. Samuel called as I reached the car. He had news. The device, the recorder you found, has metadata. The file was saved 3 days before the vault inspection. Whoever planted it wanted you to find it. I asked if the recording was genuine. He hesitated. It is genuine audio, but the timestamps are off by seconds. I think it was spliced. He explained that parts of the conversation between my daughter and David matched real surveillance from their firm's office. Someone had edited it, added lines, rearranged phrases. Enough to plant suspicion but not enough to hold as solid evidence yet. Someone is trying to manipulate both of you, he said. Both. The word hit hard. It meant the enemy wanted chaos, not truth. If both sides doubted each other, the case would collapse under emotion. I drove to Samuel's office. The city moved around me like a machine, cars, signals, people chasing their own small certainties. I envied them. At every intersection, I caught glimpses of families in cars, parents and children talking, arguing, laughing. Ordinary life. Once I had that too. When I arrived, Samuel had already called a forensic technician. They were analyzing the file on a separate system. The technician, a young man with tired eyes, played the recording through a waveform display. See this line here, he said. Background noise changes at the 22-second mark. The pitch of the ventilation hum shifts. That means an edit. So it was staged. I asked. He nodded. Partly real, partly engineered. Whoever did this had access to original material, likely internal recordings. Samuel's voice was low. That points back to Turner and Mace. Or someone with clearance. The technician continued, the voice labeled as your daughter's is clean, unaltered. She said those words, but the responses she was given were rearranged. The realization cut deeper than any courtroom argument. They had twisted fragments of her voice to create guilt that did not belong to her. Samuel rubbed his temples. This changes strategy. We can show manipulation, but we must also protect her from the damage. If she realizes what they did, she might break on the stand. I stared at the waveform again, those colored peaks and valleys that now represented my family's collapse. They used my voice to steal my life, I said. Now they use hers to kill what's left of it. Samuel nodded. Then we will make the truth louder. He handed me a small file. This is the affidavit from Dr. Gray, notarized and sealed. She is willing to testify in person. The judge will see the difference between fraud and care. Before leaving, I asked him what would happen next. The court will reconvene tomorrow for preliminary findings, he said. And we will play the unedited audio, the real version. That night, I sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet. The rain outside had grown heavier, a steady rhythm against the windows. I played an old home video on the television, my daughter at 6 years old, standing on a chair, singing off-key while I clapped and laughed behind the camera. The laughter felt like a ghost in the room. A knock interrupted the silence. I opened the door to find a courier in a gray uniform. He handed me a sealed envelope and asked for a signature. His badge read Miller. I signed carefully, watching his eyes. He looked nervous. When he turned to leave, I asked who sent it. He said he did not know, just a private legal dispatch. Inside the envelope was a flash drive labeled Truth. No sender, no markings. I hesitated, then connected it to an offline laptop. 2 files appeared, raw_audio_complete.wave and note.txt. The note read, "They are not the enemy. Look at the background at 34 seconds. I opened the audio file and listened. It was the same conversation between my daughter and David, but uncut. At 34 seconds, faint but clear, I heard a third voice in the background. A man, calm, confident, giving instructions. Keep your tone steady, he said. Say she agreed to the transfer in person. Repeat it if needed. The voice was familiar. It took me a moment to place it. Then I remembered. The smooth male voice from the registrar's corridor weeks ago. The one who said, "Handle him later." I sat back, chills running through me. Samuel had been right. Someone above them both, someone unseen, was pulling the strings. I copied the file onto 2 drives and locked one in the drawer. Then I called Samuel and told him what I had found. He asked me not to bring it to court yet. We will authenticate it first, he said. If we introduce it too early, they will bury it in procedure. I agreed. But unease lingered. Someone had delivered that flash drive directly to my door. Someone who wanted the truth revealed. But why now? As I was about to shut the laptop, an alert popped up on the screen, an incoming video call request from an unknown address. I froze. Then curiosity won. I accepted. The image loaded slowly. The screen showed a dimly lit room. A man in a suit sat in shadow, face half hidden. His voice matched the one from the recording. "You should stop fighting," he said calmly. "You have already lost what matters." I asked who he was. He smiled faintly. "The one who makes sure stories end neatly." Then the call disconnected. I stared at the dark screen, pulse racing. For the first time, I felt not just betrayed, but hunted. The storm outside intensified, wind howling against the glass. I unplugged the laptop and hid it inside the same drawer where I kept the recorder. As thunder rolled, I whispered to the empty room, "Neat endings are for liars. Mine will be honest." Somewhere in the dark, my phone vibrated once. A new message appeared. "Tomorrow, the court will see everything, including what you never told anyone." The next morning I arrived at the courthouse before the doors opened. The marble in the foyer still held the night's chill, and my breath felt like a small cloud in front of me. I carried the sealed recorder, the flash drive labeled Truth, Dr. Gray's affidavit, and a spine that felt stronger than it had in weeks. Samuel met me by the security line with 2 boxes and a nod that meant move forward, not sideways. We did not waste words. Our steps matched. Inside chambers, the judge reviewed preliminary notes while clerks arranged screens and speakers. Opposing counsel looked rested, polished as ever. David sat behind him with a still face. My daughter chose the end of the bench, hands folded so tightly the knuckles blanched. She looked smaller today, as if the suit had grown around her. I wanted to look away. I did not. Samuel opened with the chain of custody on the recorder we had turned over at dawn with a court clerk present. He laid out timestamps, the route from my porch to evidence lockup, and the technician's audit that flagged splices in the earlier clip. He asked permission to play the uncut file from the flash drive only after the court verified its origin on a clean machine. The judge agreed. A technician set up a terminal on the evidence cart and loaded the file. The waveform filled the screen like a map of a storm. At 34 seconds, the third voice entered, calm and instructive. "Keep your tone steady. Say she agreed to the transfer in person. Repeat it if needed. The room tightened around that voice as if the walls had leaned in to listen. My daughter stared at the table. David did not move. Opposing counsel rose and objected to authenticity. The judge overruled for the purpose of preliminary review pending forensic confirmation and set a narrow scope for questions. Samuel asked my daughter to identify her own voice. Her lips trembled. She nodded. He asked if she had been coached in any conversation regarding my consent. She hesitated, then said she had sought guidance on wording because she feared misinterpretation. He asked who gave the guidance. Silence stretched thin. The judge told her to answer. She whispered a name I had never heard. Samuel glanced at his notes, then at David. The name did not belong to him. It belonged to a senior partner at Turner and Mace. Samuel requested subpoenas for that partner's call logs and office recordings. The judge approved limited requests and told the clerk to contact the firm at once for preservation of data. Opposing counsel objected to scope and timing. The judge looked over reading glasses and said delay breeds rot. The courtroom went quiet. The building's cameras from the notary suite arrived mid-hearing on a thumb drive carried by a deputy. Footage played on the screen, a figure wearing my coat, my gait, entering the office. The angle was poor, the face turned away. Samuel paused at a frame that showed the coat collar. He asked the technician to zoom. A small tear at the seam appeared. I lifted my sleeve and showed the court the same coat on my arm with a clean collar. The judge noted the mismatch. A clerk marked the exhibit with a yellow tag. Next came the printer logs from Turner and Mace, released under the narrow subpoena the judge had granted yesterday. The firm's IT manager spoke by video link. His voice was flat, clipped. He read out job numbers and serial codes from the week of the supposed signing. Samuel asked about a cartridge change on the exact hour my friend described. The manager confirmed a swap and an internal test page that printed sample signatures for calibration. He started to say more, then stopped, eyes darting off-screen. Samuel asked if someone was in the room with him. He answered that he was alone and asked to proceed with counsel present. The judge told him to continue. He read a second log that listed a document named Estate Transition Letter V6.pdf queued from a workstation tagged with a partner code. The courtroom absorbed that line like a drop of ink in water. Opposing counsel tried to move the discussion to guardianship concerns again. The judge cut him off and asked for that file. The manager said it was deleted. Samuel requested the recycle logs. The manager said those logs were purged every 7 days by policy. The judge's face did not change, but the air did. Samuel called Dr. Gray. She walked through her sworn denial again, and this time added something new. The man who brought her the pre-filled forms wore a lapel pin with the firm's initials etched in black. She had thought it stylish then. Now it made her hands shake. The judge asked for a description. She gave height, build, accent. The sketch matched the man I had seen shadowing David at the charity event. That shadow finally had shape. Opposing counsel asked to call my daughter. She rose and took the stand without looking at me. He led her through questions about my late payments, my stress, my sleep. She described nights when I worked until dawn and mornings when I lost track of time. She did not lie there, and that truth hurt more than any lie. He asked if she feared for the stability of the assets. She said yes. He asked if she had acted out of care. She said yes again, voice fraying at the edges. Then he asked if David had orchestrated anything. She said no, eyes fixed on the wood grain at the edge of the bench. Samuel stood and approached with gentleness that masked steel. He asked one question only. Who told you that convincing the court would protect me? She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. She said the name of the same senior partner. Not David. Not a stranger in a car. A name with an office, a brass plaque, and years of polished respect. The judge looked down at the file, then at opposing counsel, then at my daughter. The clerk noted a recess to coordinate forensic analysis of the audio and to arrange for the partner's presence under subpoena. The gavel tapped once. We filed out into the corridor that had held so many whispers already. Halfway to the lobby, a bailiff hurried toward us. He said a package had arrived for the court during the morning session with a note that it was time-sensitive. The judge wanted both parties present to open it. We turned back. The bailiff set the small box on counsel table. The label read, Box 312 Recovered Materials, and carried the bank's logo. My stomach dropped. The judge opened the seal with a letter knife and lifted out a small camera shaped like a pen, a storage card, and a typed sheet. The sheet said the following items had been found wedged behind a hinge inside my vault box during maintenance. The card went into the reader. A single video file appeared. The screen showed a close shot of a desk, the angle low, almost from a pocket. Papers entered the frame, and a hand with a pale scar near the thumb signed a page. The signature matched mine. The face never showed. Then a second hand slipped into the frame and rotated the paper. That hand wore a ring with a square onyx. Samuel's eyes narrowed. He whispered that the senior partner wore that ring at every event photo he had ever seen. Opposing counsel objected to chain of custody again. The judge told him to save it for the evidentiary hearing. He turned to the bailiff and ordered the partner to appear that afternoon. The clerk dialed the firm. No answer. The judge sent the deputy. We waited. While we waited, my daughter stood a few feet away, shaking. I moved a step closer but did not touch her. She whispered without turning her head. I am sorry. I told her that sorry was a door, not a conclusion. I said there was still a way to stand on truth and walk out of this with a spine. Her shoulders shook once. David did not speak. The deputy returned with news that the partner was not in his office, not answering calls, and had left the building an hour earlier carrying a briefcase and a garment bag. The judge ordered a bench warrant. The words felt heavy and final, like iron bars dropping. At that exact moment, a fire alarm shrieked through the courthouse. Lights flashed. Doors opened. People poured into the corridor in a fast tide. The judge ordered an orderly exit to the plaza while evidence carts rolled toward a side door. In the crowd, a man brushed my shoulder. I smelled cologne I had noticed once in the registrar corridor. I turned, but a wave of bodies pressed me forward. On the steps outside, rain began to fall again, light and cold. Samuel shielded the evidence box with his coat. Sirens wailed somewhere down the block. I felt a slip of paper in my palm and opened it with my thumb. 4 lines, typed in the same plain font as the threats. The partner will not run. He will fall. Your daughter signed a different paper. Check the back of the photograph in the vault. I looked up at Samuel and read the last line aloud. He froze, then pulled the envelope that had held the letter from box 312. The photograph of the ring sat inside. He turned it over. Faint pencil marks crossed the back, barely there, like someone had written in the dark. 3 letters and a number. NDA. 14. Samuel's face changed. He said a short phrase that carried more force than a shout. Mutual gag with coercion clause. He looked at me. My chest tightened. A different paper. Not a transfer. A non-disclosure. Pressure sealed with a signature made under fear. The alarms kept screaming. The crowd pushed and pulled. My phone buzzed with a single message from an unknown number. Your daughter did not betray you. She protected you from a story you never told. The next morning began with silence so thick it felt deliberate, as though the whole city held its breath. Clouds hovered low over the courthouse dome. When I arrived, Samuel was already inside, his coat damp from rain. He motioned for me to sit. The partner has been found, he said. They pulled him off the highway near the state line at dawn. He laid a photo on the table, a briefcase opened, papers half soaked, a gun in a sealed bag beside them. The partner was alive but quiet. He had asked for immunity before speaking. The judge had granted temporary protective custody until he testified. The hearing resumed at 10. Opposing counsel looked pale, worn at the edges. David sat alone now, fingers drumming on the table. My daughter wasn't there yet. The judge entered, gavel striking once. The deputy led in the partner, cuffs loose, face drawn. He sat, took an oath, and spoke without preamble. The transfers were fabricated under pressure from external investors. The firm was promised bonuses for fast-tracking asset control through guardianship filings. I was told to use deep replication software to imitate signatures and voice confirmations. Turner and Mace handled the technical side. David initiated contact, but I supervised execution. Samuel asked who ordered the use of synthetic audio. The partner hesitated, then said a name that stunned even the judge. A financial syndicate that specialized in distressed estate acquisition. They had identified my holdings as a target 2 years earlier. And the daughter? Samuel asked. She didn't know the depth. She thought it was protective restructuring. When she questioned the speed, David said her parent was slipping into paranoia. We needed a clean guardianship to stabilize the assets. I told her the papers were advisory. The courtroom fell silent. I felt something between pain and relief, a slow unwinding of a knot I'd lived inside. The judge asked where the fabricated recordings were stored. Server 14, he said, under project name NDA. That number, 14, matched the pencil marks on the photograph. The judge called a recess to authorize a federal seizure of the firm's systems. While the clerk typed, I stared at the empty witness stand. The partner's confession had cracked open a wall, but it left debris everywhere. My daughter's absence burned like an unanswered question. During the break, Samuel received a call. He turned away to answer, then looked back at me. She's outside, he said. She wants to speak privately. We stepped into the hallway. She stood near the vending machine, eyes red, mascara faint on her cheek. She said, I never meant for it to reach this. Her voice shook the way it used to when she was little and caught lying about something small, cookies, homework, curfews. I asked her what she had signed. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a folded sheet from her purse. They told me it was an NDA, she said. That if I didn't sign, they'd reveal things about our family finances, about loans after Mom died, about how you hid the medical bills so the insurance wouldn't cancel coverage. They said it could ruin you. I took the paper. The language was dense: non-disclosure, indemnity, liability assumption. Her signature near the bottom. Mine, forged, beside it. She whispered, "I thought I was protecting you. I didn't know it gave them rights to act as if you delegated power." I looked at her, truly looked. She was the same child who once held nails while I built her desk, the same woman who toasted me on my birthday with trembling hands. All the layers of betrayal and manipulation collapsed into one terrible truth. She had tried to save me and lost herself in the attempt. She said, "David convinced me this would stop you from being dragged into bankruptcy. He said investors were circling. He said you'd thank me." I asked where David was. She said he disappeared after the partner's arrest. His phone off, his office cleared. Samuel joined us and told her the court might call her next. She nodded and walked back into the room with us, shoulders squared in a way that reminded me of her mother. When the session resumed, the partner had been moved to a secure room. The judge reviewed an interim report from the seizure team. Multiple forged templates recovered, including mine, my friend's witness file, and the doctor's signature scans. Each was stored under the tag client NDA 14. The judge looked up. "This court recognizes preliminary fraud sufficient to invalidate all contested documents. Guardianship petition is vacated. Estate transfers are null pending verification." I should have felt triumphant. Instead I felt hollow, like a soldier hearing silence after endless gunfire. Then my daughter rose. "Your Honor," she said, "I need to testify." The judge allowed it. She stood at the witness stand, voice fragile but steady. "I was manipulated. I thought I was helping. I was told my parent was vulnerable, that oversight was kindness. I ignored my instincts because fear spoke louder. I see now that fear has a voice for sale." The judge asked if she had proof of coercion. She produced the NDA. Samuel submitted it as Exhibit H. The judge read it, then sighed. "This document binds silence through threat. It does not protect. It enslaves." Opposing counsel tried to object, but even his own tone faltered. My daughter turned toward me. "I am sorry," she said aloud, clear enough that the room heard. "I let them convince me love meant control. I see now that love without trust becomes cruelty." Tears came, quiet but unstoppable. For weeks I had imagined this moment as rage or vindication. Instead, it was mercy, raw and complicated. The judge recessed for the day to draft a formal ruling and referred the case for criminal investigation into the firm. The gavel struck once more. Outside, reporters gathered behind barricades. Samuel shielded us from questions and guided us to his car. As we drove away, the city seemed to exhale. Halfway across the bridge, my daughter spoke. "There's something else," she said. "A backup drive in David's home office. It has everything: the investor contracts, the real voice models, the payment records." Samuel looked at me. "We'll get a warrant," he said. She nodded. I already gave the address to the authorities. The rain had stopped. The sky turned a weak blue, light leaking through the clouds. For the first time, it did not feel like judgment. It felt like breathing. When we reached home, she followed me inside. The house smelled of dust and old flowers. I poured tea for both of us. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she said, "I don't expect forgiveness." I said, "Forgiveness isn't a trade. It's a door. It stays open, but you still have to walk through." She nodded and stared at her cup. "I want to try." That night, I slept for the first time in weeks without waking in panic. The storm had broken, but the wreckage remained. Somewhere, David was running. Somewhere, the investors waited to see if their scheme had failed. And somewhere inside me, something fragile began to mend. Before dawn, a message arrived on my phone, no number, just text: "He will reach for her before he falls." I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. Some threats do not deserve a place in the morning. The courtroom felt colder than the weather outside. The clerk arranged fresh water on the tables as if thirst were the problem. Samuel whispered that the seizure team had copied the servers through the night. He looked tired and ready at the same time. I squeezed the pen he had given me days ago and watched the door. My daughter sat 2 rows behind me with folded hands and a steady gaze. She caught my eye for a second and did not look away. The judge entered, calm as a winter lake. Papers stacked in front of him. He spoke in short lines that left no space for spin. The guardianship petition was void. The medical report was false. All transfers tied to the forged files were set aside. A special master would watch the accounts while the criminal case moved forward. He referred the matter to the state bar and the district attorney. Each sentence landed like a stamp. Opposing counsel stood and tried to say my stress and late payments still raised concern. The judge cut him off and read a note from the independent clinician who saw me yesterday. Oriented, clear, no signs of cognitive decline. The judge looked over his glasses and said the court would not be used as a net for people who fish in other people's lives. He told counsel to sit. Relief did not rush me. It crept, cautious, like light through blinds. I kept my face still. I had learned that stillness wins more than loud joy. The senior partner came in with deputies at his back. No cuffs this time, but no swagger either. He wore the ring without pride. He confirmed the project name, the voice bank, the signature engine, the printer swaps, the courier network. He said outside money had pressed them hard. He tried to shift blame to David. The judge listened, then asked one clean question. Who pushed the button on the first forged file? The partner said he did. The room exhaled in a low, wordless sound. My daughter rose when called and answered in a voice that did not break. She said she had signed an NDA under threat. She said she had believed fear. She said she had chosen silence over doubt and silence had grown teeth. She did not look at David. She did not look at me. She stared straight at the bench and told the truth with no decoration. The judge thanked her and called a short recess. Reporters shuffled. The deputy opened a side door and in walked David with two plainclothes officers close behind. He wore the same careful smile he had used at my birthday dinner. It looked thinner now, like a mask left in the sun too long. He sat with counsel I had not seen before. They spoke in low tones, heads close. Samuel leaned in and told me the seizure team had found a folder on server 14 that matched the pencil marks on the photograph. NDA, 14. Inside, payment schedules, voice models labeled with my name, my daughter's name, and a list of other targets. My stomach turned at the sight of that word, targets. I asked how many. He said more than a dozen. I wrote the number in my log as if that could give those strangers a witness. When the judge returned, he moved through the orders without pause. He read the findings on identity theft. He barred the firm from contact with my family. He froze the accounts of the shell companies that funneled money from the transfers. He signed a warrant for a search of David's home office. He set a date for a restitution hearing and put the special master in place with clear rules. Then he looked at me and said something I did not expect. You documented what others thought you would forget. That record saved you. I felt heat sting my eyes and blinked it away. Opposing counsel stood and pushed a last try. He said my daughter had been part of the plan because she had spoken words on the edited tape. Samuel asked to play the complete clip again. The judge nodded. At 34 seconds, the third voice gave instructions. The judge stopped the file and asked David to identify that voice. David said he could not hear it clearly. The judge had the technician raise the level. The words filled the room like smoke. Keep your tone steady. Say she agreed in person. Repeat it. The partner on the stand nodded once and said the name of the consultant who trained the staff to coach witnesses. A new name joined the list for subpoenas. Then the turn I had been warned about arrived with the weight of a thrown stone. David asked to speak. He said he never meant harm. He said the investors were the real engine. He said he would cooperate. The judge told him to save that for the other court. David looked past the bench and searched the seats until he found my daughter. He opened his hands like a prayer and said he had done this for them, for their future. She did not move. The room went quiet enough to hear the tick of a wall clock. The deputy stepped forward. David tried to stand before the order, as if he could walk out on his own terms one last time. The judge's voice did not rise. 2 words, plain as a door closing. Remand, custody. The smile on David's face did not break. It vanished. He turned his head toward my daughter one more time, but she had already looked away. The officers led him through the side door. Silence followed him like a shadow. The judge spoke again and set the next dates. He thanked the special master for agreeing to start today. He told the partner to expect more questions. He told counsel to prepare for sanctions. He turned to me and asked if I wished to be heard before the session ended. I stood and said I had a single request, that the court inform the other families on the list. He agreed and ordered notices. We filed out into a corridor that had held too many secrets. Reporters leaned in. Samuel said no comment. My daughter and I stood near the staircase with an arm's length of air between us. She said she would testify in the criminal case. I said that would matter. She nodded and wiped her face with the back of her hand, a small, childlike motion that cut through the armor I had grown. Outside, the air had the clean smell that comes after rain. Samuel went to meet the agents at David's house. I waited near the steps for my daughter to join me. We walked side by side without touching, the way people walk when they are learning to be careful with each other again. At home, the rooms felt less hostile. I set out 2 cups. We did not drink. We went through the list of things that had to be done: new locks, new passwords, calls to tenants, calls to vendors, a meeting with the special master. She took notes, and I watched her hands steady as she wrote. When she finished, she slid the notebook to me. The last line on the page read, "I will make this right." Samuel called near dusk. The team had found the backup drive: contracts, models, ledgers, courier routes, payout splits. A second list of names. He said the agents would move on those leads tonight. He also said one file carried a code that matched the small note I had received during the fire alarm. The code pointed to a separate vault across town rented under a shell tied to the firm. He would join the agents there. He asked me to stay home and rest. I said I would try. After we hung up, my daughter asked me about the loans after her mother died, the ones the NDA had used as a blade. I told her the truth, that I had taken them to keep treatment going, that I had kept some bills off the record to stop coverage from vanishing, that I had carried the debt so she would not. She cried without trying to hide it. I put a hand on the table between us. She placed her hand near mine. "Not touching yet. Close. Enough for now." Night came soft. The house did not feel like a stranger. I walked to the wall with the pencil marks and drew a new line in my head: not for height, for strength. A measure you do not see until you survive something that tries to erase you. My phone buzzed once more. A message with no sender. Just 2 lines: "Verdict is not the end. Check the photo you keep near the door." I stood and went to the small frame by the entryway. Her 5th birthday, icing on her chin, my hand on her shoulder, both of us laughing at a cake that leaned to one side. I turned it over and found a thin slip of paper tucked into the cardboard. 4 words in neat script: "Empty chair." Said it. I felt a chill run through me, not fear this time, something closer to a summons. A reminder of the dinner I had not been able to finish, the one that started this storm. The case had named facts, punished acts, set guards around accounts. It had not yet reached the quiet space where love and loss meet without an audience. I set another plate on the table that night and sat with the thought of an empty chair and a full heart. Tomorrow would bring sentences and headlines and warrants. Tonight I needed to hold the part of me they could not copy, the will to keep the door open. Morning light spilled across the kitchen table, the same table where the birthday dinner had begun. The house felt both familiar and new, as if it had been rebuilt in silence overnight. The marks of the storm remained: boxes of legal papers, folders stacked in neat towers, and a few dishes still out from the night before, but the air was different. It no longer felt occupied by ghosts. My daughter came down the stairs slowly, the sound of her steps uneven, as if each one carried memory. She poured herself coffee without speaking. We sat opposite each other, quiet, not from distance but from understanding. Samuel called. The search of the secondary vault was complete. Inside, the agents had found not just documents and drives but a ledger of payments to officials, false medical records, and a set of passports with my photo under different names. The same tool used to forge my identity had been used to create others. Dozens of parents, business owners, retirees, each marked as an opportunity. "They're building a full indictment," he said. "You started something larger than your own case." I told him I hadn't started anything. I had just refused to stop. He said that was the difference. After the call, my daughter asked what would happen next. I told her that justice is a process, not a moment. That truth takes its time to finish speaking. She nodded and looked out the window, eyes wet but calm. "I never imagined," she said, "that love could be used as proof of weakness." I said, "They bet on that. They always do." She asked if I hated her. The question hurt more than any verdict. I told her hate requires energy I no longer had. That what I felt was heavier and older than hate. It was sorrow mixed with hope, the kind that keeps you from locking the door forever. We cleaned the table together. She reached for the photo near the entryway and paused when she turned it over. "Empty chair," she said softly. "Said it." I nodded. Tonight, that evening, we cooked together. Not for celebration, not for closure, just for peace. The smell of onions filled the house. Music played softly from the old speaker, the same playlist her mother used to hum to. At dusk, Samuel arrived. He had come straight from the courthouse with news: the partner had pleaded guilty. David had confessed under pressure, naming every investor. The accounts were frozen, the properties safe. "You're free," Samuel said. "On paper, at least." He handed me a copy of the final judgment. My name restored, my signature acknowledged. It looked clean, precise, but to me, It read like a scar healed over, smooth but never the same. My daughter brought out the plates. We set 3 this time, one for me, one for her, and one empty, at the head of the table. The chair where her mother used to sit, the one left vacant at every meal since she passed. We sat, the 3 of us, 2 bodies and a memory. The air carried warmth instead of tension. My daughter whispered, "Maybe it's strange, but this feels like the first real dinner we've had in years." I said, "Strange things are often the most honest." She smiled faintly. Then she reached into her pocket and placed something on the table, a small USB drive. "There's one last thing," she said. "David left this hidden in his drawer. I found it when the agents searched." Samuel looked wary. "What's on it?" She shook her head. "I didn't open it. I thought we should do it together." We plugged it into the laptop. One folder appeared. Inside, a single video file, time-stamped the night of my birthday dinner. The footage was from a hidden camera, angled toward the table, grainy but clear enough to see faces. It captured me, my daughter, David, and our guests. The audio was faint, but you could hear laughter, forks against plates, the toast. Then came the moment I had replayed in my mind 100 times, my daughter standing, announcing her decision to manage the properties. But the video showed something different. Before she stood, David had leaned in and whispered in her ear. She had hesitated, shook her head, then whispered, "I can't." He replied, "You have to, or it's over." Her hands had trembled before she lifted the glass. The smile she wore had been fear, not betrayal. The camera kept rolling after everyone left. David had stood by the counter, speaking softly into his phone. "It's done," he said. "She doesn't suspect a thing." The sound of those words filled the room again, but this time they healed more than they hurt. The truth had waited, patient, buried inside a device no one thought to check. My daughter began to cry, shoulders shaking. I reached across the table and held her hand. "You tried to protect me," I said. "And I tried to protect you. Maybe we both forgot how to protect ourselves." Samuel quietly stood and left us there, closing the door behind him. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, thunder rolled across the distance, but it was softer now, almost kind. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. "Will you ever forgive me?" I said, "Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a door you leave open. You can walk through it whenever you're ready." She nodded. Then, almost shyly, she asked, "Can I come home?" I looked around at the walls, the photos, the history that had survived fire and lies. "You never really left," I said. We ate quietly. The empty chair stayed untouched, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, of presence, of peace, of everything we had nearly lost. Later that night, after she went to bed, I sat alone at the table. I thought about what the judge had said. "You documented what others thought you would forget." He was right. But memory had done more than save me, it had rebuilt me. The rain started again, steady and soft. I opened the window and let the air in. Somewhere out there, news anchors were telling the story of the case, calling it the birthday fraud. They'd never understand what it really was, a story of trust bent, but not broken. I looked at the photo on the wall one last time. The child covered in icing, the hand on her shoulder, both of us laughing at imperfection. I whispered, "You grew up, and so did I." Before turning off the lights, I sent a message to Samuel, "Dinner ended. Story not over. Thank you." Then I walked to the door, looked at the empty chair once more, and said softly, "I said it." The wind carried the words away, and for the first time, the house felt completely at peace.